Hi, and welcome to the seminar about unlocking the value of existing space and materials in buildings. My name is Klas Cullbrand, and I'm the Innovation Manager at the Strategic Innovation Program called Resource. This seminar is arranged under the Nordic Circular Summit, and these are the partners involved in arranging the summit. And as you can see, we are quite a bunch. During a little bit more than an hour, I will guide you through this session, and we will listen to presentations, have discussions, and watch some short films. And at the end, we will also have an awards ceremony, so stay tuned for that. We will start by listening to Kristina Mjörnell, Business Innovation Area Manager for Sustainable Cities and Communities at RISE, Research Institutes of Sweden. Among others, she will introduce us to a framework that helps prioritizing actions to increase resource efficiency in the building and real estate sector. After that, we will be joined by Magnus Österbring, Research and Innovation Coordinator at one of Sweden's biggest construction companies called NCC. He will talk about his experience from renewing a space observatory with as much reused materials as possible. Last but not least, Rushdi Al-sálehi, business developer at the architectural firm Co-Design and founder of the building sharing platform Vakansa, will enter the stage and join us from Stockholm. And he will talk about how we can maximize the use of already existing buildings. But before I start, I just want to say a few words about Resource, what we are. So, as I mentioned, Resource is a strategic innovation program in Sweden. We are financed by the Swedish Energy Agency, the Swedish Innovation Agency Vinnova, and Formas. And we have the vision of material use within the planetary boundaries. So everything we do should be in line with this vision. We do a lot of things, but among others, we are gathering stakeholders, we are arranging seminars and conferences, we are spreading knowledge, we are spreading solutions, and try to inspire by spreading also good examples. But at the very core, we are financing projects and supporting the projects that we are financing. So to date, we have financed about 250 projects. And each year we spend about 2 to 7 million euros to fund these projects. And we also have a new call that will open in November. And there's a link in the chat for more info about that. Now, without further ado, I will now welcome you all. Welcome Kristina here. Welcome Kristina. And I'll let you introduce yourself again. Who are you? And then go ahead with your presentation.
I'm Kristina Mjörnell, and I work for RISE. And today I'm going to present efficient use and adaptive reuse of buildings. Well, if we are going to achieve the targets of the Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainability Development Goals, we need to reduce both the environmental impact and the use of resources and energy for both construction, operation and maintenance of buildings. And several sectors have developed principles how to increase resource efficiency. And today I will present the 4-step principles for buildings adapted for the construction and real estate sector. And it includes the following 4 steps, with the first step being the least energy and resource demanding. So the first step is about to reduce the need for space. And the second is to intensify the use of existing space, which can be done by sharing space between different activities. I will come back to some examples. And the third space involves renovation or adaptation of buildings to new needs and different uses. And the 4 steps means that if we cannot do anything in the first 3 steps, then we have to build new buildings, and we need to build them as flexible and with the design for deconstruction and use reused material. Well, the first step is about reducing the need for space. And digitalization has opened opportunities to reduce space for some activities that are done digitally and no longer require any physical space, such as banking, e-commerce, healthcare, certain educations, streaming services like films and music, but also stores reduce their space and have smaller showrooms and to display their goods and the customers buy online, and the distribution of goods is done directly from the warehouses. And also after the pandemic, many companies has reduced the office space and are introducing flexible office space solutions or using co-working facilities. And the second step is to intensify the use of space. Examples are the activity-based office. It could also be activity-based lecture halls that can be converted to group exercise rooms after the lecture is finished. And we can also think about streets and parking spaces in the cities that could be converted to areas for recreation, for meeting and seating. When it comes to housing, there are different forms of sharing housing, like renting out part of your house or part of your apartment, or renting out your apartment while you are not there. It could also be co-housing and generational living, which are good examples of sharing space. The third step is renovation and adaptation of existing buildings to new use. And this is an old factory that is probably being converted into some kind of offices or lecture facilities or commercial facilities. Renovation of, for example, the buildings from the Million Homes program has been going on for many, many years. But the last couple of years there have been an increased focus on gentle renovation, trying to preserve as much as possible to reduce costs, both for the building owner and the tenant, and also try to reuse as much building materials and products as possible. And lately we have also we can also see increased interest in adaptive reuse of older buildings. One example is this old liquor factory in the south of Sweden that is converted into office space and housing. And in the wake of the pandemic, we also see a lot of empty spaces in our big cities. And at the same time, we have a lack of housing, especially in the main city areas. And we asked ourselves if it's possible to convert these empty office spaces into housing. Would it be possible? So last spring, we made a survey of 500 empty premises in Gothenburg and 500 in Stockholm to see if those empty spaces could be suitable for conversion into housing. And we assessed the empty spaces in terms of 4 aspects. The first one was if it's located near to services. The second one was if it's located near to public transport, recreational areas, and the last one if it's suitable for residents. And the result was that 39 empty premises in Gothenburg and 22 in Stockholm could easily be converted into housing with very small renovation measures. And almost 100 empty spaces in Gothenburg and more than 100 in Stockholm could be converted into housing after some reconstruction. And so many of the offices are quite spacious and can easily be divided into several apartments, which means that altogether we estimated to find about 600 apartments and in Gothenburg and 400 apartments in Stockholm. But it's not that easy to just convert an office into housing. Here you can see some examples of office spaces that are quite easy to convert, but there are still many barriers. So if we look at some of the barriers, here. There are a number of barriers for conversion. There could be political barriers such as conflicts between political goals. Some goals in the city are that the empty spaces on ground level should be for commercial purposes and not for housing. And the economical one could be that you get lower rent for housing and than you get for renting out office space, and there is also cost for conversion. The social, well, when you convert empty office space, there will always be you will always disturb some existing tenants, and there could also be accessibility issues when you convert office space to housing. The technical, you have regulations for light, noise, fire and energy use for housing that is not the same for office space. And when it comes to the environmental barriers, you have quality issues, you could have lack of life cycle perspective, etc. And the legal ones, it's very much about regulations in the city zoning plans and also CE labeling of materials to be reused. Well, going into the last step, the fourth step, which is new construction. And in some cases, there are no existing buildings filling the needs. So we have to build new. That's the only option. But then the new building should be designed and built flexible for future needs. It should be possible for deconstruction, possible for moving, and with as much as reused materials as possible. So these are some examples of buildings that are possible to deconstruct. And just to sum up some conclusions, this four-step principle could be used as a mean to reach the goals for decreased carbon footprint, increased robustness to climate change, also reduce segregation, and provide affordable housing and attractive living environments. And there is also a huge potential for efficient use of space, sharing of space, renovation and adaptive reuse of empty premises to other uses. But there are several challenges, both technical, financial and legal, to implement this on a large scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kristina. I'm curious here, you mentioned all these barriers. Which would you say is the most challenging of them?
At this time, I think it's the regulations, the zoning plan in the cities that are regulates the use of any space.
Yeah, and in what way are they are the zoning plan hindering the development?
I mean, if according to the zoning plan, there are like buildings used for living or housing, and there are buildings used for commercial and other uses like industry and so on. And you can't easily change that today.
Yeah. So, and when we talked earlier, you talked about, but there are specifications about what you can use the buildings for.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something. Maybe it could be a better idea to specify what it's not supposed to be used to.
We tried to find out if it's possible to convince or to change the regulations, convince the politics. I mean, there has to be change in the regulations. So if that could be possible, more flexible use of space according to the zoning plan would be better.
Okay, so
and maybe regulate what kind of use is not recommended for this space instead of saying what should be there.
Okay, so you can convert, for example, an apartment building to a hotel, but you're not allowed to convert it to a chemical factory or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. So we talked about you mentioned all these barriers, but what are the incentives for example, the building owner?
Now we can see a lot of empty space. So there are maybe no incentives yet, but when you have empty office space, I mean, after a while, you don't get any money for like income for that space. So, I mean, in the long term, I would say that it would be profitable to rent out, even though the rent is lower, much lower for housing than for office space.
Yeah. When we talked earlier, you mentioned that we have high legal requirements on buildings in Sweden, which is a good thing. That it means that we have a high living standard and we have a high building standard in general. But there are some downsides to this as well. You mentioned a few of them. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, there are. I mean, very strict regulations when you build a house or renovate a house, reconstruct a house. Or a space into housing. So there are accessibility requirements, noise, lighting, and so on. And it's very important to protect people living in apartments, of course. But I think we could have a look at that and see if we could be a little bit more flexible and look into the regulations and see if there are small changes to be made in order to get more space available for housing, so to say.
Yeah, and perhaps during at least a limited time or something like that.
Exactly. We are thinking about maybe not permanent contracts, but maybe like renovation contracts or demolishing contracts would be a way to solve this urgent lack of housing.
Thank you very much, Kristina. We will talk more with you later during this session. And we will now move on to Magnus from NCC. I will soon let him into the studio here to join us. But before we do that, we will watch a short film about the research project that Magnus led, where they rebuilt a house or a building at the Space Observatory. And Magnus and I will talk more about that after the film.
Al-sálehi rymdobservatorium söder om Göteborg. När man byggde det nya besökscentret hade man ett mycket tydligt fokus. Återanvänd så mycket det bara är möjligt, både stort och smått.
Här har vi fokuserat på allt byggnadsmaterial och egentligen så långt det går försöka hitta allt material, allt ifrån golvmaterial till bärande konstruktioner till fönster och dörrar. Totalt sett så är 40% av allt byggnadsmaterial utifrån vikt som vi använt här återbrukat. Och det är allt ifrån pålkapen i grunden till en del av smidet som man ser här inne. Stålbalkar och pelare.
Utmaningen var också att få tag i så mycket återbrukbart material som möjligt. Så en viktig del blev att inventera digitala plattformar och tillgängliga nätverk.
Och det är väl någonting som vi har sett också under projektets tid, att ju mer vi har frågat desto mer har marknaden utvecklat sig, och nu finns det aktörer som har börjat tillhandahålla den typen av produkter. Det är väldigt mycket som är återanvänt här, bland annat då skivmaterial som vi använt här. Man ser fortfarande lite hål från där det har suttit förut, och sen så har man egentligen bara målat om och skruvat upp igen. Vi har också radiatorn här nere som också är återbrukad. När man pålar ner i backen, slår ner betongpålar, så är det lite olika långt ner till berg, och då får man lite stumpar över. Och just de här stumparna kommer från projektet i Liseberg. De här är ju egentligen avfall i vanliga fall, så det är någonting som vi har nyttjat och fått köra hit gratis i princip. Det är en hel toalettgrupp som har tidigare suttit på Swedbanks huvudkontor i Stockholm som vi då har fått hit. Så att det är återbrukade toaletter alltihopa. Det här är framtiden för vissa typer av byggprojekt, kanske framförallt när vi ska börja renovera vårt befintliga bestånd, så kommer vi nog se väldigt mycket lösningar som bygger på just återbruk.
Har du 100 000 ton av något material som du vet vad det är, då kommer någon innovativ människa att hitta på någonting att göra med det här, för det är ju en resurs som du nästan får helt gratis. Så att jag tror att det här är en mix av både storskalighet och småskalighet. Och vi får också se att när vi förr i tiden pratade om linjära värdekedjor, så pratar vi om värdenätverk. Vi som kunder är ju också någon slags säljare. Man säljer sina saker på Blocket, man går med sina gamla dörrar till en återbrukare. Så att det är ju en helt ny verklighet vi måste anpassa oss till.
Welcome, Magnus. First of all, who are you and what's your role at NCC?
So my name is Magnus Österbring. I work as Research and Innovation Coordinator, and I run mostly research-related projects.
Yeah, like the one we just saw.
Exactly.
So yeah, and when we met up at this specific building at the Space Observatory, I was amazed by all the huge list of learnings that you sort of started to pile up one after another, perhaps unintentionally. But what would you say were the key learnings from this project?
I mean, first of all, it actually works to use reused construction materials at this scale. What we kind of hoped for perhaps was that the market was more ready for it. The digital marketplaces that had been developed at the time were maybe in a little bit more of a nascent stage than what we would have hoped, but that was also the hypothesis that we wanted to try in this project.
No, and you mentioned during this film that during the project you realized that once you started asking for reused materials, you said in the film that you thought that, or you realized that the market actually started to grow as you started asking or demanding the materials. Please tell me a little bit more about that.
So specifically in this project, we needed to get our hands on reused steel, which at the time was quite tricky to do. And what we've seen since, especially after the project, is companies have developed standards for how to actually reuse steel and get them out on the market again. So there are now several actors that provide this kind of service. Mm-hmm. And I think these types of research projects can really drive supply as well, because we started the demand for these materials, basically.
Yeah. So you are aware that you play a huge role for the market development, and you need to demand these materials from your suppliers. But how about your customers? Have they sort of woken up as well, or are they demanding from you these kind of projects?
Certainly, and that's how this project came to be. Chalmers Fastigheter was very early on the reuse train, let's say, and that's typically how the construction industry is driven when it comes to new development. It's either through legislation or through developers who want to go ahead basically and start up these new, a little bit more avant-garde solutions, let's say.
Yeah. And we will come to a little bit later here. We'll talk a little about the new project that has been obviously been demanded. But coming back to the Al-sálehi project, what were the most sort of challenging parts of building this building?
Steel, as I mentioned, was quite a large issue, trying to find steel that was deconstructed in a way that it wasn't damaged, and that had the sort of right dimensions that we needed as well. So that was more of a supply issue, let's say. Other than that, the logistics of it, trying to sort of gather up reused materials and have a place to store that, and the whole logistics chain, I think was a bit of a challenge as well. We would probably have needed more space to begin with to sort of bunker up and have more materials readily available close to the construction site as well.
Yeah, and maybe someone saw that in the movie. The Uppsala Space Observatory is also positioned quite sort of challenging, and you had some challenges with the communication among others. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Certainly. So the Space Observatory is by the coast and quite far out from any major roads, let's say. But in addition to that, it's a live space observatory where they have radio telescopes doing research, which means you cannot use a cell phone. Any sort of technical equipment has to be checked so that it works with the environment out there. So it was going back to basics, having a fixed telephone to the site manager.
Yeah. So you had big challenges with both logistics and communication, but always you made it work. So if we can make it work at this kind of site, we could probably make it work at several other places as well. And sort of the economic part of it, was this was it profitable, or was it sort of how was the economic of the project?
We ended up fairly close to break even, but that's also considering that we had research funding for this. Otherwise, I do not think that it would have been possible to make this happen.
Yeah.
But then again, when you're sort of first trying something like this, additional costs are to be expected. So that's nothing strange.
Yeah. Moving on to more recent events, sort of. You recently won a big tender for a new building project. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so it's a new project here in Gothenburg with municipal housing companies building residential apartments. So bigger project, instead of 500 square meters, it's 5,000 square meters. So it's going to be very interesting to see if we can achieve the same sort of reuse levels, target here being 50% as well, when we try and do this at a larger scale.
Yeah, really challenging. What part of the tender, or how big part of the tender did the Uppsala project play?
It's always hard to assess the evaluations of tenders, but of course, the learnings that we took from that project play, I think, a big part, but also in the construction industry, it's typically very important to show that you've been able to do something like this before. So having that as a reference case as well is a big deal.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about the profitability, and I think that you would probably not send in this tender if you weren't thinking that it could be profitable this time around, or?
No, of course.
No. So this time it's not a research project, this is for real.
Yes.
Very exciting. Yes, and Kristina mentioned some difficulties related to policies, but when we talk, I don't get the feeling that you see the sort of same policy-related issues as Kristina perhaps do, but you're with a different focus, of course. But are there policies hindering the development, or are they sort of okay?
I think most of the issues that Kristina talked about are zoning issues, zoning laws, and that can definitely be an issue. But in this case, it's mostly the construction rules that we have to keep in mind, and they are fairly flexible. And if you spend time and energy on these issues, you can usually find ways of working, perhaps not the normal ways of working, but still develop ways of working that exist within the building code. So from a policy point of view, legal point of view, there are not really any hinders as such. Perhaps you could talk about making it more profitable with reuse from a taxation point of view, but that's a bigger question.
Yeah. Great. My last question then, going back to the Al-sálehi project, what part of the project are you most proud of?
Of course, proud of the fact that we actually managed to build a new building using a lot of reused materials, but specifically the cut-off concrete piles. I think that solution is quite an ingenious one actually, and using something that's typically considered waste as part of the foundation here instead was really quite the achievement, I think.
Thank you very much, Magnus. We will come back to you as well a little bit later. But now it's time to move on to our next speaker. He is Robin, and he's joining us over link from Stockholm. But before we let him into the sort of studio, we will look at another film for another project.
I Solna ligger kvarteret Yrket 3. Det är ett pilotprojekt inom ramen för ett större projekt som kallas Återhus. Och vad man tänker göra är att bygga hus. Av hus.
Det är lite ödsligt. Vi ska ta stommen, eller del av stommen från det här projektet att återanvända i ett annat projekt som kommer att stå här på granntomten så småningom.
Det är många aktörer med i konsortiet och de har alla samlats kring en vision som leds av 2 arkitekter. Första steget var att gå på skattjakt.
Så vi var ett gäng som tittade här nästan en hel dag. Och konstruktörerna och vi också blev alldeles lyckliga när vi såg den här stommen.
Man ser ju att det är moduler som sitter, eller ligger på den balken. Så att de modulerna kan man ju plocka loss då. Men det är verkligen segment som har standardmått.
Projektet började med en magkänsla av att det bara måste vara möjligt att återbruka allt det som går till spillo i byggindustrin. Och det finns möjligheter, om man vill.
Vi säger ju sig att betong blir ju bara bättre med åldern. Så länge den är torr och varm, allra helst, då lär det inte vara något problem. Det där skulle man ju vilja ha i ett nytt projekt. Det kan man bygga vad som helst. En skola, ett universitet, stadshus, bibliotek, bostadshus. You name it!
Vi får fokusera på de tunga sakerna för att det är där man gör mest effekt när det kommer till avfallsminskning och alltså miljöbesparingar kan man säga.
En del av projektets resultat bekräftar att det är fullt möjligt att använda befintligt material. Utmaningarna handlar snarare om saker som garantifrågor och certifiering av återbrukat material. Mer flexibla detaljplaner eller hur man planerar hus från början.
I den bästa av världar, om man nu får säga så, då skulle man kanske kunna rita husen lite mer efter vad vi har istället för tvärtom. Idag ritar vi oftast husen först och sen ser vi vad som finns.
Projektet har nu passerat genom flera faser och även om resultaten är goda är det ingen självklarhet att bryta ny mark i en traditionell bransch.
Det har ju verkligen krävts modiga byggherrar, fastighetsägare.
Det är en förändringsresa. Jobbar vi med innovation är det ännu tydligare en förändringsresa och den kräver mod. Någon måste gå första steget.
Erfarenheten är ju inte så stor ännu inom det här segmentet heller. Men viljan är väldigt stor.
Yes, we're back and we should now have our next speaker, Robin, with us over link from Stockholm. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Klas. Thank you.
Who are you and what's your roles? You have 2 roles.
I have many roles. I work as a business developer at an architectural firm called Co-Design that you saw a bit about in the clip. But I'm also the CEO and founder of a facilities sharing platform called Vakansa.
Great. Before I talk to you in your role as the CEO and founder of Vakansa, I want to move back to the film and ask you, this was a project that has now finished. It was financed by Resource, but what has happened after the project? Has it turned out, resulted in anything else, new projects or etc.?
I mean, it has resulted in the construction sector definitely moving forward when it comes to using recycled materials and dismantled materials. For co-design, we have been one of the founding partners in the project called Återhus that you heard about in the clip, where we have had several pilots working with dismantling building materials and using those materials in new constructions. And so there have been a lot of pilot projects. There are new, we are seeking more grants from the state to continue the research and development of this practice. And we're quite happy about the results and what the future will hold.
So it sounds like this hasn't been a sort of a separate initiative for co-design. It sounds rather that it has spilled over on the whole business. Is that sort of a true statement?
Well, it has been true for co-design, but also the whole construction sector. The whole construction sector in Sweden talks about this right now, how to use dismantled building materials in new constructions. And it's a way of future-proofing the sector that has had a history of exploiting resources in a take, make, dump kind of model, and is trying to create a circular model out of the resources that we already have and that we've already exploited. So it's something for the whole sector in Sweden and probably the world as well.
Super interesting. And as a business developer, do you feel that, like the same kind of question that I asked Magnus before, do you feel that your customers have awoken sort of, are they demanding these kind of projects?
They are demanding, some more than others. But what we definitely see is that the demand for these kind of building materials that have been dismantled in a project somewhere in Sweden, that the need for those kind of materials is probably bigger than the stocks that we have in different logistics centers around Sweden. So the need for these materials is bigger than the demand is bigger than the market can provide.
Okay. I want you now to switch over to your role as CEO and founder of Vakansa. And to start with, tell us about Vakansa.
So Vakansa is a facilities sharing platform that focuses on making the most out of the square meter spaces that we already have, the already existing buildings and facilities. What we are trying to do is to help existing tenants to rent out their spaces when spaces are standing unused. I think every one of us after the pandemic has realized that we have buildings and facilities all around our cities that are completely or partly vacant. And a couple of years ago, I did a TEDx about how resource inefficient the building and real estate sector is, and presented a term that I call time vacancies. So time vacancies are the time that the existing tenant isn't using their space and that could be used by some other tenant. So what we are doing is to match different tenants that could use the same space over time or at the same time, making sure that the space is used resource efficiently.
And as Kristina told us before, there are vast amounts of vacant buildings and real estates. And why is this, do you think? Is it just lack of demand, or is there something else happening here?
So it's not the lack of demand. I would rather say that there are a lot of tenants out there that are struggling with rents and finding suitable, cheap, and flexible spaces to use and rent. The conventional way of renting out a space has been to rent out to one tenant that signs a contract for 3, 5, or 10 years, and the demand has switched and changed quite a lot after the pandemic, and the real estate sector hasn't really. When it comes to co-working, it has changed its view on how to use and rent out space. But when it comes to other tenants and other commercial spaces, there are still laws, rules, and regulations that hinders us from sharing space with others. But one of the biggest problems I would say that we have today when it comes to completely vacant buildings and facilities is that the real estate sector, when it does its accounting and when it measures the value of the real estate, it's all based on the historic rents that a real estate owner has received. So if a real estate owner has received, say, 2,500 kronor per square meter per year for a specific space, and that tenant decides to move out, the real estate owner is almost forced today, when we look at how we are doing the accounting today and measure the value of the real estate, the real estate owner is almost forced to find a tenant that could pay the exact same amount as it has been renting out a space for in historically, or a rent that is above, for example, 2,500 kronor per square meter per year. So even if there are tenants that could pay 2,000 kronor, a real estate owner would say no to them. So we have a lot of spaces that are unnecessarily vacant. And what we at Vakansa is trying to do is to actually try to do something about the artificial lack of space that we have in our cities, because that's the problem that we have. It's an artificial lack. It's not a factual lack. There is an abundance of square meters in our cities. We haven't really learned to share them, and that is what we are doing at Vakansa. Help tenants to share spaces.
So the reason for the real estate owner not renting out it cheaper is that it directly affects the value of the building. Is that correct?
The value, and then it affects the interest rates and the loans and the whole business really for a real estate actor. So what real estate actors do today when they can't find a tenant that could pay, for example, 2,500 kronor per square meter per year, what they do is that they put in their accounting, they put something called vacancy rent. So a speculative rent to uphold the value of their real estate, their property. So it's something that we've just, the human brain is fantastic in that way. We've innovated this artificial lack and this vacancy that we see in our cities. It's man-made. It's not factual.
Yeah. We will talk more with you in a second here, Robin, but now we will invite back Magnus and Kristina also back into the studio. We will have a short panel discussion before we wrap this session up. And perhaps, do you have any reactions to this vacancy rent thing that Robin is talking about, Kristina?
Yeah, I agree with him totally. I've also seen this.
So it's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem that we need to overcome in some way.
Yes, we will now. We are all three here now. I will give you two questions, the same question to all of you, and you can answer it relatively short. So the first question, and we start with Magnus. What do you think is the single most important challenge to overcome to enable a more sustainable use of buildings right now?
I think better using the existing building stock that we have and actually increasing the utilization and renovating that part of the stock, as well as looking at converting spaces that are no longer needed. That's the core of this circular transition, at least.
Okay, so sort of remain in the real estate focus instead of the building focus or NCC's focus of wanting to build something.
I mean, there is still construction to be done when it comes to renovation, when it comes to conversion, adapting office space as well. So I think we'll see perhaps a little bit less of new construction in the future and more of taking care of the existing stock that we already have.
Kristina, same question to you.
Yeah, I agree with you. But to add something, I would see a flexibility in terms of regulation for what a building could be used for. Yes. So that's, I think, the key issue.
Yeah, so the zoning plans, for example.
Zoning plans could also be regulations about, I mean, what is regulated in any residential building, for example, as well.
Okay. Robin, your answer to the same question.
Well, I've had a mantra that I've been using for a couple of years now, and that is that the most sustainable building is the one that never has to be built. At least in the Swedish context, where we already have an abundance of square meters. So I agree with Kristina and Magnus that we need to reduce the amount of square meters that we build. I think it's projected that we will double the amount of square meters that we have in the world until 2060, and that's just impossible. We don't have the resources, we don't have the possibility, or the atmosphere can't manage that amount of emissions. So what we have to do, and what we are trying to do at Vakansa, is if we at least can double the use in the existing buildings, then we can solve the need for square meters that way, instead of doubling the amount of square meters by construction.
Yeah. My second question is, and we now start with you instead, Robin, is that if we jump, let's say, 5 years into the future, what do you wish that your company, or in your case, Robin, your companies have accomplished by then?
Well, at least in the Western world, where, as I said, we have an abundance of square meters, I would love to see Vakansa to be an established actor, helping tenants all around the world to make more use of the space that they are renting. And as I said, I would love to see if we could, when it comes to, for example, office space that is being used as little as 10% of the time, if we could help office tenants to double their use to 20 or perhaps 30% of the time, then we would reduce the need for new construction. So in 5 years, I would love to see Vakansa be an established actor, working with and making the most out of the space that we have, making sharing something that is as simple as just renting a space.
Before I ask the same question to Kristina, Magnus here, what do you think is required for Vakansa to have this great growth and to become a sort of a very stable and important player in 5 years?
Well, one crucial aspect or factor is that everyone that is listening to this to actually contact us at vakansa.se and find ways to partner up with us, or just ask for help and understand what we need to do. But as Kristina said, we also need to look at the existing laws, rules, and regulations and how we value our properties in order to make a structural difference and change. Because Vakansa is a startup, and it's not enough for a startup to make this change. The whole sector and the whole sector has to do a change, and then we need to change the laws, rules, and regulations.
Yeah. And Kristina, the same question that Robin had. In 5 years, what do you want RISE to have accomplished?
RISE is continuing doing research in this field, and I think we have overcome, I don't know how to overcome many of these barriers I mentioned in my presentation. I think one of the key issues is the quality issues about reduced materials. We have not solved, but we have, we have come further on that and know how to handle reused materials. I think also we have looked into the requirements of on buildings used for housing and try to ease up that and to make it possible to convert many more buildings into housing if that's the needs.
Magnus?
Yes. In 5 years, I think we have successfully reduced our waste streams significantly. We've always been fairly good when it comes to sorting waste. Now we also need to reduce the total amount of waste to enable reuse and recycling in those aspects. And then I think for us, as for much of the construction industry in general, there will be a shift in focus from new construction, which has been the main mode of operating in the last 10 years due to the interest rates being very low, into focusing more as well on the existing building stocks and being able to handle the sort of complexity that's involved when you work in existing buildings, perhaps with tenants involved as well. So that's hopefully the transition that we see in the next 5 years.
Do we need other types of competences to enable this transition, do you think, Magnus?
I think we will see more integration of knowledge in construction projects, especially from our suppliers as well, because they are experts when it comes to handling their material. And sort of being that knowledge integrator, I think it is where we will try and position ourselves going forward as well.
And Kristina, you're working with knowledge, obviously.
Yeah,
What's your...
I think it's a huge need of new competences, because it's very different to mount a new product or material from scratch than to preserve and to renovate an existing part of a building or material or product. So it's a totally different knowledge. You need also to be skilled as a workmanship and so on. So we need, I would say NCC need to change and need to find new skills of your employees.
Thank you very much, Magnus, Kristina and Robin, for taking the time to talk to me and join this session. It is now time to wrap up. And we will now change focus slightly. We will move from sort of the building part of the built environment to the transport infrastructure. In a joint effort, we at Research, together with our sister program InfraSweden, have launched an innovation challenge this year, with focus on resource efficiency within the Swedish transport infrastructure. And it's now time to announce the winner of this challenge. So with that, we will now leave the studio here in Gothenburg. Thank you very much again. And we'll move over to Stockholm and the award ceremony for the Innovation Challenge InfraAwards.
Då vill jag önska varmt välkomna till prisutdelningen av innovationstävlingen InfraAwards. Vi kommer att göra en presentation av de 2 strategiska innovationsprogram som är arrangörer av tävlingen. Och det är de strategiska innovationsprogrammen InfraSweden och Resource. Jag kommer att ge en bakgrund av innovationstävlingen InfraAwards och vi har format den här tävlingen tillsammans inom de strategiska innovationsprogrammen InfraSweden och Resource. Och vi har försökt hitta det lilla gemensamma formatet när vi tittar på våra olika sakområden. Och det vi har landat in i är en utmaning för mer hållbar användning av resurser inom transportinfrastrukturen. Innovation inom det här området kräver ju resurseffektivitet. Och det passar extra bra i år naturligtvis eftersom InfraSwedens utlysning när vi delar ut finansieringen också handlar om cirkularitet. Och de som har hjälpt oss med att använda de här bedömningskriterierna är vår eminenta jury. Och de är en samling av företrädare för våra branscher. Vi vill rikta ett stort tack till samtliga. Och nu ska vi få höra en röst ifrån juryn. Det blir Pontus Grus från Trafikverket som kommer att berätta om fördelarna med att även använda sig av innovationstävlingar. Vad skiljer innovationstävlingar från övriga satsningar som görs i branschen?
Nej, men alltså det pågår väldigt mycket satsningar. Man får den bransch man förtjänar tycker jag. Man måste jobba beställare och utförare hela tiden för att utveckla både beställare och branschen. Det som skiljer primärt det är att vi kan ta ut svängarna lite grann här. Vi är inte styrda på samma sätt som vi är i upphandlingar och då kan vi få in helt andra förslag men som kan skapa nytta in i kärnverksamheten över tid.
Då tänker jag att vi riktar uppmärksamheten mot programchef Camilla Byström som kommer att vara med oss under sändningen. Och idag har det äntligen blivit dags att presentera årets vinnare i InfraAwards. Camilla, kan du nämna 2 fördelar med innovationstävlingar?
Ja, innovationstävlingar är ett spännande och effektivt sätt att hitta lösningar på problem. Och det gör man då genom att prisa det bästa förslaget, att utse en vinnare.
Och historiskt så är det många uppfinningar som är resultatet av innovationstävlingar. Kan du ge några exempel på det, Camilla?
Ja, det går ganska långt tillbaka till tiden vad det gäller innovationstävlingar som vi ser dem idag. Redan 1795 till exempel så utlyste Napoleon en belöning till den som kunde göra mat mer hållbar. Det var såklart väldigt viktigt för att kunna lyckas hålla soldaterna i fält stridsdugliga. Så efter att utfäst belöningen så utsåg man en vinnare några år senare. Och det var en godistillverkare som fick ta emot priset för metoden att konservera mat i lufttäta glasburkar. Då hade alltså vakuumförpackningarna sett dagens ljus.
Vad spännande historia. Och InfraAwards som tävling har utsett 5 vinnare genom åren. Vad har de vinnande bidragen handlat om där, Camilla?
De har handlat om väldigt skilda saker inom just transportinfrastrukturen som vi arbetar med. Det har till exempel handlat om tågväxlar som görs vertikalt istället för horisontellt. Får man mycket mindre problem med att de fryser igen. Och vi har även prisat en lättviktsbro i trä som kan flyttas enkelt.
Tack så mycket Camilla. Jättespännande att höra mer om bakgrunden till innovationstävlingar. Och nu ska vi stifta närmare bekantskap med årets tävlingsbidrag. Och upplägget är att vi ska få se en 3 minuters pitch i form av en film från respektive bidrag. Så lyssna noga nu när du ska få se och höra om hur vi kan vara mer resurseffektiva inom 2 olika områden.
Sverige använder förhållandevis mycket land per invånare och vår väginfrastruktur som är både lång och bred är en stor faktor. Vi avser att bygga cykelvägar ovanför vägdiket för att spara pengar, miljö och biologisk mångfald. Modular Cycling och Sweco står bakom detta förslag. I dagens samhälle bygger vi asfalterade gång- och cykelbanor som har en stor påverkan på miljön och behöver mycket material. Istället för att använda tunga material som stannar på plats främst tack vare sin vikt har vi utforskat användningen av hållfasthetsklassat virke för att skapa broliknande konstruktioner med punktuella fundament som delvis täcker vägdiket inom det befintliga vägområdet. Konstruktionen kan användas som underlag för trottoarer eller gång- och cykelvägar och på så sätt utöka trafiksäkerheten för de oskyddade trafikanterna utan att behöva ta mer naturmark i anspråk. I stadsmiljö kan innovationen möjliggöra hantering av dagvatten vid skyfall och infrastruktur för aktiv mobilitet på samma yta samt minskad värmeeffekt. För att bemöta utmaningen som uppstår när diket hamnar under GC-vägen tittar vi på skräddarsydda skötselplaner, smart konstruktiv utformning och preventivt underhåll. Vi använder prisvärda standardbyggprodukter, något som ökar reparerbarhet och konkurrenskraft. Flera framgångsrika tester av modulkonstruktionen har genomförts och vi har samarbetat med branschaktörer för att säkerställa att vår lösning uppfyller alla krav och att den inte skapar problem i framtiden. Genom att samla väghållare, lösningsutvecklare och branschens kunskap runt bordet ska vi säkerställa att lösningens genomförande lyckas. Konstruktionen innebär en cirkulär och sparsam användning av resurser. Den kan minska materialanvändningen med upp till 90%, cirka 1400 ton per kilometer, undvika schaktning och förstörelse av markekosystem samt minska transporter till och från byggplatsen med cirka 70%. Den ersätter ohållbara material som oljeprodukter och bergkross med lokalodrade skogsprodukter som lagrar koldioxid. Dessutom minskar markanvändningen och en cirkulär användning av resurser främjas genom återbrukbarhet och projekterad återvinning. Att använda industriell tillverkning gör det lätt att återbruka byggmaterial när rätt kvalitet kommer på marknaden. En modulär konstruktion innebär även att tillfälliga vägar kan konstrueras med korta byggtider och begränsad miljöskada och hög återställbarhet. Vår innovation har stark ekonomisk potential. Genom att undvika kostsamma utvidgningar av vägområdet, förenkla markundersökning och minska riskerna kopplade till vägarbetet kan vi sänka kostnaderna för anläggningar av nya gång- och cykelvägar. Tillverkning i större skala innebär lägre kostnader och bättre jämnare kvalitet. Sammanfattningsvis är vår innovativa lösning för gång- och cykelvägar miljö- och plånbokssmart. Genom att bygga ovanför vägdiket kan vi minska vårt behov av resurser och begränsa vår markanvändning. Samtidigt som vi får säker och funktionell infrastruktur för framtidens generationer. Vi tror att vi har potentialen att göra en verklig skillnad och arbeta tillsammans för en bättre och mer hållbar framtid.
Vår idé är att kombinera konceptet småskalighet och variation med bullerplank. Och småskalighet och variation i form av skräp. Det kommer variera och det behöver anpassas i design. Formgivning är en av nycklarna till lång livslängd. Idén bygger på att man behöver koppla ihop designverktyg och databaser som visar vad som finns i olika tidsfönster och var det här materialet finns. Vi tror på samverkan. Det finns många goda krafter och vilja till att bygga bättre för framtiden. Även om vi som materialtillverkare jobbar på att optimera produktionen och skräddarsydda skivor som optimerar så att större del av materialet kommer till användning, bättre beställningsrutiner, så blir det ändå alltid skivor lite här och där som blir över. Det blir ändå skräp som blir över och som hamnar på deponi. Helt i onödan trots att det är fina produkter. Det blir hela felbeställningar. Till exempel fel produkt, det kommer för stor mängd till bygget och så vidare. Dessutom tål fasadskivorna att sitta ute och tål väder och vind under många år. Och ibland har de inte hunnit tjäna ut när huset gjort sitt och ska rivas. Demonterade skivor från rivningsprojekt passar även in här. Idén bygger på att använda bullerplank som testbädd. Det passar in i konceptet variation då bullerplank ofta blir tråkiga. Bullerplank är långa. Även om de är väldigt fint designade, som detta i Göteborg, riskerar de ändå att genom sin längd och repetition ge ett allt för storskaligt intryck. Så här skulle det vara en klar fördel att utgå från variation i formgivningen. Bullerplank har även en annan fördel. Bullerplankan finns där vi alla i befolkningen rör oss. Det är publikt. Att lyfta skräp till värdefull resurs här skulle kunna inspirera till helt andra områden. Det finns redan fibercement på bullerplank. Tekniken är känd och det finns erfarenhet kring hur det funkar i praktiken. Här behövs ingen teknikutveckling. Det finns även många olika sätt att montera skivor. Det är arkitekten som har skapat de flesta innovation och som tar skivorna in i finrummet för design. Det kommer hela tiden ut nya. Just att utgå från udda skivor tror vi kommer att ta designen vidare. Samarbete mellan arkitekt, byggmaterialtillverkare, logistik, återförsäljare och byggare. Såklart tror vi blir ett framgångsrecept. Med en BIM-verktygslåda för design kopplat till info var överblivet material finns och sparar det som BIM-objekt kan man räkna ut och göra stora miljövinster. Såväl som spara en hel del pengar. Och framförallt, ge skivorna en andra chans att få glänsa.
Nu är det dags att lämna över till InfraSwedens programchef Camilla. Och det är hon som kommer att avslöja juryns val för oss. Så Camilla, hur lyder jurymotiveringen?
Den lyder så här. Genom att länka samman materialflöden hos de 3 branscherna producerande industri, byggbranschen och anläggningsbranschen så tar sig Swisspearl sig an en väldigt angelägen uppgift. Att anta utmaningen att nå cirkulär ekonomi genom att överbrygga informationsgap, det är både innovativt och spännande. Skräp på väg har möjlighet att bidra till en attraktivare stadsmiljö genom arkitektoniskt genomarbetade gestaltningar inom ett område som hittills i första hand har varit präglat av bara funktion.
Vinnaren är skräp på väg. Välkommen säger jag till Anna Ranov från Swisspearl och stort grattis naturligtvis. Hur känns det?
Jag känner jättestor förväntan och det ska bli så spännande att ta det här förslaget vidare och driva det så att vi kanske kan se på skräp som ibland är en värdefull resurs.
Det kanske är så att ni redan också har fått några insikter med er ifrån innovationstävlingen, för det är vår förhoppning med de som deltar. Har ni någonting redan nu som ni har insett?
Ja, det är så att redan när vi började titta på de här utmaningarna så såg vi nya möjligheter. Och sen tänka större var ju en helt ny dimension i idén, gav idéerna kraft. Plus att när man gick vidare och pratade med andra experter så hade de också väldigt mycket inspiration och del i lösningen.
Ja, vad fint. Och har ni något medskick till andra som kan vara intresserade av att delta i InfraAwards?
Jag tror rent generellt så tror jag att arkitektur och formgivning kommer vara vägen framöver. Så rätt material och på rätt plats. Och det kommer bidra till att det vi bygger kommer få längre livslängd och om det är underhållsfritt så är det också ännu bättre.
Och vi är ju också nyfikna på, hur hörde ni talas om InfraAwards?
Det var faktiskt hos Svensk Form. De hade anordnat ett designmingel med temat klimatångest och klimatterapi. Där i ett samtal så dök Trafikverkets innovationssatsningar upp. Och jag hittade till tävlingen och idéerna som vi har burit på länge fick se dagens ljus.
Vad roligt att höra. Och finns det några personer som du särskilt skulle vilja tacka, Anna?
Ja, mina medarbetare som är kunniga och så roliga att jobba med. Men också våra konsulter. Det är ju ett samarbete. Och sen så skulle jag också vilja tacka min dotter Kristina. Hon är nu i London och läser masters i nationalekonomi och hållbar resursutveckling. Hennes driv och även ser jag också ungdomarnas driv ger hopp inför framtiden så att vi kan bygga bättre samhällen och vara mer resurssnåla.
Vad fint, Anna. Och jag tänker att det här är ju ett viktigt ansvar för oss alla. Kommande generationer har förväntningar på oss som vi också behöver leva upp till. Med det, Anna, så skulle jag än en gång vilja gratulera till vinsten och överlämna det här diplomet. Och vi ser fram emot resan som precis bara har börjat tillsammans. Tack så mycket!
Tack ska ni ha!